Welcome to our 6th video now.
Oh my god.
And 6th is Gestalt.
It is Gestalt Psychology.
Which is an approach that has always eluded me. I understand that it exists, but I've always struggled to understand what makes it different from any other approach.
Yeah, I didn't really get it until I started writing the script for it. So it's definitely one that's covered in courses, but not to a point where we remembered it.
Yeah. The only thing that I ever take away from any sort of lecture that mentions it is that it's a holistic approach to psychology. Yet, in the context of Gestalt, I've never really understood what that's meant. I understand what a holistic approach is, but I don't understand why it's different from like the humanistic holistic approach.
Yeah, so that's what we'll be doing today, and we'll all come away knowing more for it, which is fun. So Gestalt Psychology was developed in Germany roughly around the same time that Watson was developing behaviourism in America. So at the time, psychology was just kicking off. Like, everyone was coming up with new ideas, everyone was arguing back and forth. The Gestalt psychologists completely opposed the idea of behaviourism. They didn't like anything to do with it. They also opposed Freud's psychoanalysis. So everyone was just at each other's throats constantly. Like, you're wrong, we're right, rah, rah, rah. Massive battle. And the idea of Gestalt psychology, the reason they put together this whole new field was because they wanted to explore people's experiences, not just their behaviour, like how they experienced stimuli rather than just how they responded to them.
And so Gestalt psychology was founded by Max Wertheimer in 1912, and he was concerned with how mental processes in the brain were organised. One of the key arguments within Gestalt psychology is that perceptions are the product of complex interactions between these processes, and when a system or a person has a perception, the whole has a reality of its own independent of the parts. So what that means is that the perception that the person holds is a reality unto itself. It's not necessarily the reality that they think that they're perceiving, because it's perceived through these processes. It's reality plus that person and their processes.
Yeah, reality plus how they want to organise what they're looking at. Early experiments dealt a lot with perceived motion. So Wertheimer looked at the phenomenon where you see two separate lights which are positioned quite close together and flash in quick succession, and he realised that when a subject looked at this, they would not see two separate lights. They actually saw a light moving from one position to another. So it's kind of like, you know, those spinning wheels you get on loading screens.
Yeah.
It's actually a series of still images, but because they're so quick, it looks like it's moving in a circle. So that's what he was looking at. Reality was one thing, so reality was a series of still images, but the individuals saw it as something that was moving. So they experienced it totally differently to how it actually was.
Maybe a more sort of relatable example of this could be, the reality is you're at a party, but it's down to the person's personal information processing whether they deem that as a good party or a bad party. So they've added their processes onto the reality of the fact that this is a gathering of people, but they say.
Yeah, no, definitely. So this phenomenon of experiencing perceived motion was familiar, and Gestalt psychologists sensed that it had some theoretical importance in the fact that it was the patterning of the stimuli specifically which produced the effect. How the stimuli were related to each other was what caused this idea of perceived motion.
So would Gestalt psychology be the sort of go-to approach to explaining things like visual illusions, where you have those static images that look like they're moving around just because of the way that the colours or the shapes are put together?
Yeah, 100%. And then you've got all of the ones like, is it a duck or a rabbit and things like that. They looked at a lot of those actually. Yeah, definitely.
Interesting.
So yeah, the idea basically was that all of this information, all of these experiments on perceived motion suggested that experiences themselves depend on the patterns formed by stimuli and how the individual organises that experience.
And you may be familiar with the idea that the whole is different from the sum of its parts. I think we might have covered it in humanistic psychology, so I'm starting to think my confusion between the two might not be unfounded. But it was Kurt Koffka who is often attributed with this phrase, and what it means is that because the whole not only consists of its parts but also consists of how the parts are related in a system is information unto itself, so the whole result of these different parts is the parts plus the way that those different parts are interacting with each other. So they would always be more than just the simple parts.
The study of perception, once it was broken down by the Gestalt psychologists, was they sort of defined it as how everyday things are experienced. It wasn't just sort of the big events, it was just normal everyday experiences. And they broke it down to involve three concepts: sensation, association and attention.
So just breaking those down a bit more, I guess sensation would be the feeling of the experience.
Yeah.
So if you're experiencing a sunny day, you might have the sensation of sunlight on you. The association may be then that you associate sunlight with happiness, so you experience the day as a happy day because you're sunny. And then the attention is the fact that you notice that it was a sunny day, and you notice that sensation, and you created meaning out of that sensation.
But then the other effect that attention would have would be that if you were already having a bad day before you left the house, you wouldn't necessarily be paying attention to the weather, so you wouldn't notice it was a sunny day, you wouldn't feel the sun, and that wouldn't make you feel happy. So two different people can walk out of the same door at the same time and have a completely different experience of the day and of the weather.
Yeah.
No, definitely.
I suspect as well you'd find we're skipping a bit to cognitive psychology, but a bit of confirmation bias, and that's where you look at things that sort of justify the perception of reality that you already have. So if you are having a bad day, you might not notice if it's sunny, but you're going to notice straight away if it's raining, and you're going to be like, oh, just my luck. I knew the universe was against me.
Yeah, and then you'll always remember that sort of experience. So you'll be like, oh, whenever I'm sad, it rains, and that's why you get a lot of
God complexes.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say scenes in films where when sad things happen, it's raining. But God complexes too. That can happen. Another psychologist, so as well as Wertheimer and Koffka, another psychologist who was involved in the Gestalt movement was Kohler. And he did a lot of experiments with animals. He was looking at animal intelligence and animal behaviour. He also studied under the physicist Max Planck. And
Planck's constant?
Yes, yeah. And he focused on the argument within physics that whilst the general belief is that scientists need to understand the parts of a system before they can start explaining the more complex situations which arise from that system, many physicists were also arguing that many phenomena can only be understood when you look at the system as a whole rather than breaking it down.
Like gravity, for example, you only understand gravity by looking at the way the biggest objects interact.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the whole system to work out the force, etc. But you can't really study it on its individual
Yeah,
parts.
if you broke the system down to all the individual atoms, you'd find it very difficult to study gravity because it doesn't really arise from individuals.
Well, if they've both got the same mass, they'd have like equal gravitation. There won't be anything to measure, so you need to look at it as a whole.
Yeah, so you need to see, are those atoms interacting? Are they linked together? Are they completely separate? In order to, yeah, no, definitely.
But psychology. There are two main theoretical principles of Gestalt psychology, and the first is the principle of totality, and that means that conscious experience must be considered globally. So if you're considering someone's experience, you can't just consider the sensations they have, you've also got to consider what they associate those sensations with, whether that's positive or negative or neutral. You have to take into account all the physical and mental aspects of the individual simultaneously, because the nature of the mind demands that each component be considered as part of a system of dynamic relationships. So a bit like gravity is meaningless if you break it down to atoms, neurology is meaningless if you break it down to neurons, because a neuron firing is a yes or no signal, but you need the rest of the connections to give meaning to that on-off.
Yeah, each component's binary, like you say, but when you put them all together, you can have a very complicated outcome.
You can make words and art and YouTube videos. The brain does that.
Yep, definitely. The second theoretical principle is that of psychophysical isomorphism. And this is the idea that there's a correlation between conscious experience and cerebral activity.
And there's since all of Gestalt, there's been a lot of really exciting research in this field. We'll have to find the reference for it. But there's one where they got a monkey to watch 100,000 hours of YouTube videos while recording the neuronal activity. And what they did is they sort of built a map of what the visual cortex receiving in the brain looked like, so that when they then played another video, they could record the monkey's brain activity again, and with a computer algorithm sort of translate that back into what the visual cortex was seeing, so they could roughly work out what YouTube video they were watching.
Wow.
By coding what all the different nerve impulses related to. Because I mean, you've always got to be careful with computer screen analogies, but it's a bit like pixels on a computer screen. There is the visual cortex that sort of takes in pixel by pixel, and if you know what a neuron looks like when it's firing red, green or blue, if you build enough of a record of that, you can then recreate it.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I think there's some video footage, so we'll see if I can try and find that.
That is really cool, actually. I had not heard of that.
But yeah, so not all of these are like the be-all and end-all of theories, but they've all really generated some really interesting research. And
yeah, definitely. So yeah, with this second principle, as we can see from this study, it guided Gestalt psychologists and other psychologists after them to find biological foundations for mental behaviours.
Which we'll cover in more depth.
Yes, because it's super exciting. And to study psychology and conduct experiments under more natural conditions. So they wanted to see how people respond to everyday events in an everyday environment with everyday behaviour, just literally how normal people work in normal situations. But yeah, these aspects of Gestalt and Gestalt as a whole is now considered to be a stepping stone on the road to what's now known as cognitive psychology. So this episode's going to link in with so many future episodes. Things like perception, even language will probably come into this. It was probably, at the time, there were lots of different theories floating around, but this one is probably best remembered for being foundation of cognitive psychology and really contributed to that field.
Just to sort of finish off our exploration of Gestalt, because it is quite a difficult one to sort of differentiate from some other, well, mainly humanistic.
Yeah.
I think they've kind of both got a similar sort of philosophical approach of approaching things as a whole. But I think perhaps the main difference between them is their focus. So obviously Gestalt is focused on perception and experience of reality.
Yeah.
And sort of biological cognitive mental processes, whereas humanistic psychology is more focused on motivation and getting, it's almost like a positive psychology, getting people to like self-act. Gestalt isn't necessarily as focused on improving mental health, it's focused on understanding how the brain works, whereas humanistic, like Carl Rogers, is all about people-centered therapy. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is about motivation, and then he's got his sort of like self-actualization.
Because there is a therapeutic method called Gestalt therapy or something along those lines, but whenever I looked at the articles, they all said this is either very loosely connected to Gestalt psychology or in no way related to. It wasn't really an approach to psychology that could be used for therapy. It's very much understanding normal behaviour, whereas humanistic is improving normal behaviour or improving...
understanding how people improve on their normal behaviour.
Yeah, definitely.
One therapy that I think you could maybe attribute to in the past Gestalt psychology is cognitive behavioural therapy.
Yeah.
Because if cognitive psychology is influenced by Gestalt, and Gestalt's all about how your mental processes affect your perception. That's the basis of CBT. If you can change the way your brain processes information, you can affect the sort of effective outcomes.
That's so true, actually. That is so true.
Thank you for watching, guys. If you want to and you'd like to, feel free to subscribe to us and maybe drop us a little thumbs up. Because we're only little.
That's a compliment.
So
Yeah, it all moved really fast.
yeah.
Really, really fast.